So we'll just say.
Well, I have it's 2 minutes after, so I'm going to kick off this thing. I obviously am Susan Leabhart. I am the Empress of DAGOBAH. And DAGOBAH, as most of you know, is the Davenport area gathering of books and humanoids. We are a book discussion group. We meet at the Davenport Public Library on the second Monday of each month at 6 o'clock. So if you're ever in the Quad Cities, feel free to jump in and say hi to us there in person. We always go out afterwards and have a burger and a root beer at Boozy's Bar and Grill afterwards. So we make an evening of it. After the library closes, we go for a root beer. DAGOBAH got started in, check my notes here. There was a PBS series called The American Sci-Fi Movie. It was running on Iowa PBS from October of '84 through January of 1985. And the Davenport Public Library, one of my friends, librarian Margaret Jane Scott, had a discussion group. So every week we would go to the library and discuss that week's movie. Well, we got to see that there were a whole lot of fans in the Davenport area. So we had an organizational meeting in July 15th, 1985. And that's when DAGOBAH was born. The name was originated by a man named Bruce Boyd. He was at the organizational meeting, and then he was at our 25th anniversary meeting and has never been to a meeting since then. So that's just it's sort of fun. So he saddled us with the name and then split. But we have been meeting pretty much every month since 1985. And we now, it's been, you do the math, it's been a lot of years. And in January of 1992, we played our first game of what we call Science Fictionary, which we now take to DemiCon every year as Win, Lose, or Draw. So we were sitting in the audience at DemiCon 2, I believe, and they were writing the clues and throwing them into the box as the artists were drawing the clues out. And Margaret Jane and I looked at each other and said, we could do this. So we went up and talked to some of the DemiCon folks and approached them about hosting Win, Lose, or Draw. And we've been doing it ever since. So the box is cruel, but we have fun. Okay, so that is a brief introduction about who DAGOBAH is and what we are. We're all about reading. We're all about literacy. Although we do talk about genre movies and television and stuff as well, because they're, we're all fans. We're all big fans. Every month we start off our meetings with book reports. We go around the room and we talk about what books we've read that month, whether we liked them or not. Some people go into more detail than others, and some people say, I got nothing, I didn't read anything this month. But that's okay. That's okay, because it's all good. It's all good. So I thought, normally I'm the one who finishes up the book report cycle, and that way I can just keep track of who's spoken and who hasn't spoken, and get out the yardstick if I need to. Some of those guys, you gotta be on them. You gotta be on them the entire time, because they're out of control. They're out of control. So I thought I could start us off this time so you can sort of see what we do with our book talking books. So this has been kind of a big time period. I haven't been able to talk with books to anybody, so I've just got a couple of ones that I want to mention here tonight. First, I'm going to start off with Rachel Aukas's new book, Bounty Hunter. It's set in a dystopian sci-fi world. It's not The Mandalorian, but it's got that sort of feeling. It's a dystopian sci-fi with sort of a wild, wild west atmosphere to it. The characters are great, and I recommend it. And I have already pre-ordered the next 2 books in that series. And that's Rachel Aukas, who is an Iowa author. So shout out to Rachel. She's great. The second book I read was The Weller, Fear of the Dark by Adam Whitlatch. Adam is another Iowan and also a familiar face to the DemiCon people. This is the second in his Weller novels. I was so impressed. I have been reading Adam's work for a very long time, and his writing style has grown immensely. Every novel, he gets better and better, and I think in this book you can see him hitting his stride. This is another dystopian post-apocalyptic novel. I read a lot of those. This one is set in Mark Twain country of Missouri, and it's a lot of fun. It's got the river, it's got river pirates, it's got giant catfish with heads the size of Volkswagens. And trust me, they are in the river. I know for sure. My next book I read was this was The Last Emperor by John Scalzi. It was the final book in his Collapsing Universe series, and it's a space opera. Great Scalzi. I listened to this on Audible, and Will Wheaton was the narrator, and it just made the whole book wonderful. So this is another, I will recommend it highly. Scalzi made me cry, just saying. And yeah, it takes a little bit to get me to cry when I'm reading an Audible or listening to an Audible book, but man, he did it. He did it. So next time I run into him at a convention, I'm gonna like kick some dirt on his shoes or something. And my final book, and this one I was glad I finished this one last night, and it was Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, her Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents, those books. It was amazing. I love Octavia Butler. She was, sadly she is now no longer with us, but she was an amazing writer, and this is another post-apocalyptic novel. I must be on a roll this month. But she's a wonderful writer, and I would recommend anybody who hasn't read Octavia Butler to read Octavia Butler. I cannot say enough wonderful things about that woman. So that's what I read this month. So why don't we can go around, and if you want to tell us what books you've been reading and why you like them, I guess indicate to Joe by raising your hand or unmuting yourself or something, and share with us what you have been reading this month. Looks like Melissa.
Hi. Well, I've been waiting. Of course, all the books dropped like in the last 2 days. One of them the newest one from Gail Carriger. You guys, I met her last year. I had only read the first book and half of the second one of the original Parasol Protectorate. So the new one came out today, and I'm following her page on Facebook. And everybody's like, no spoilers yet. People just got. But I've also been reading a long-time series of another series of Iowa authors. It's a husband and wife team, Barbara, I can't remember her, and Alan something. They're out of, they go by the name of Barbara Allen, and they write a what they call their Trash and Treasure series. It's a they set it in Serenity, Iowa, and Serenity County, but they're out of Muscatine, and every way they describe the town, it's Muscatine. So one of these days I'm going to get to Muscatine and visit the town, because they talk about the Button Museum and all this other stuff in the stories. But it's a crazy mother artist who was, heads of the local, theater group, and the daughter is divorced and moved back from Chicago and is living with her mother. And over this series of books, this town has had so many murders. Yeah. And of course, Vivian and her daughter Brandy are out solving the crimes. And it got to the point 2 books ago, she was running for sheriff. And then the last book I read, she had won and was solving one of her first big cases. And now the new one just dropped, and I'm only into the first chapter, but I was like, it's so much fun, because I now work in a place that does uniforms, so I'm pitching her in the sheriff's uniform and everything, and it's so much fun, very lighthearted. I want to say there's at least 10, 12 books and 2 or 3 short stories. They've done a bunch of little Christmas short stories, and it's just a lot of fun, humorous. They talk about shopping at Yonkers, which is depressing now that Yonkers is gone. But and she always describes their clothing, and at the end of chapters, there's like, if Vivian put in a babka recipe, she made something to take. So later in the end of the chapter, they gave you the whole recipe. So there's lots of fun little things like that throughout that I'm really enjoying, and I'm so happy to get the new book. It's on my Nook. I couldn't wait to download it now. So that's what I've been reading.
Awesome. Well, Muscatine is just down the river from us. Who else wants to share some books? Come on. I know you read, but I know you've been busy also. Looks like Cindy does.
Well, as most of you know, here, let me make it super duper obvious. I'm a big David Weber fan, which is why I'm in that Royal Manticore and Navy thing. And I had read all of the Honor Harrington books, but I hadn't read all of his other books. So I finished the DAGOBAH trilogy finally, and I now get the t-shirt that they sell that says, "Will there be a reply?" which is the last line of the last book of the trilogy. Yes. And I happen to have gotten on his first reader list. So right now I'm reading the Valkyrie Protocol, which will be out in October, and it is the sequel to the Gordian Protocol, and they are time travel books. And there's one section of the Gordian Protocol where I heard in my head the Immigrant Song and saw the little Viking cat video. Mm-hmm. There's a section of the book where that popped into my head, and I let Jacob Hollow know that. And he said when he saw my message, he blew pop out of his nose. So he knew exactly what section I was talking about. Mm-hmm. But they're all very good books that I would highly recommend.
Thank you. Yeah, I like Honor Harrington too. There's a special place in my heart for Honor and the Honor verse. All right, well, who else has been reading? Craig, have you been reading? I know you're out there.
All right, so the last one I finished reading, it's called There Will Come a Darkness. It's by Katie Rose Poole. She's a newer young adult author. I'll be honest, there were parts of the book that were a little predictable, but it was still really good. The universe that she has it set in is kind of very loosely built around the Mediterranean and the countries that ring the Mediterranean. So one of the nations in the book is very much kind of like Egypt. One of the nations in the book is very much kind of like Greece. But it was very fun. So it's the first in a series. So there's going to be 2 more. I'm not sure when the next one's supposed to come out, maybe next year.
Good. Thank you for reading, Craig. Makes me proud.
So I used to read most. when I was using the elliptical at the gym, and now all the gyms are closed, so I find it harder to read.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe now that Virtual DemiCon is nearly over, you'll have more time to read.
So I did just get delivered. I mentioned this one the other day in Letty Prell's panel. The author is Tommy Adi. I'm not going to pronounce her name. I'll type it in the chat here in a bit. But she has this series. The first one was called Children of Blood and Bone. And the new one, it just got delivered to my Kindle, I think just this week, is Children of Virtue and Vengeance. That one was really, really good. Somebody mentioned, I think she was on somebody's top choice for books to read this summer or something just recently. But I guess she's a Hugo and a Nebula winner, and supposedly they're turning them into movies soon. But it was a really, really neat series.
Cool. Thank you.
Sally,
Looks like Sally.
your hand up.
Sally's got her hand up.
Sally.
Oh, okay. It was last month because when they come out, I can't delay reading them. But I read Patricia Briggs' Smoke Bitten, which is the book 12 in the Mercy Thompson series. And Patricia Briggs was a guest of honor at DemiCon. I want to say 26,
Somewhere in there.
I think. And she and her husband were the guest of honor. And if you've read any of Patricia Briggs' stories, you know that Mercy ends up with Adam Hopman. And if you ever met Patty and her husband, you know that her husband, Mike, was Adam. I mean, he just is. So Adam passed away about I think 2 years after they were at DemiCon, very suddenly. And so it's very bittersweet to read this story because to me, there is in that story, there's an underlying tension in the relationship between Mercy and Adam that I think Patty is working out as part of her grief process as she writes this story that she's struggling with that. And it was just very touching to me. And I think just knowing the two of them, and having met them, it has a different meaning for me reading it than it would for other people that didn't know them or hadn't met them or didn't see that in-person relationship. I don't know, my sister met them too. Cindy, have you read the book, and did you have that same experience reading that?
First of all, when I met them at DemiCon, and we had the chance to go out to dinner with them, and it was so totally obvious that Mike was Adam. And even I and another person were out in the hallway outside the con suite, and we were having a emotional, sentimental moment, and there were tears, and he came out and he had to check to make sure that we were all okay and that nothing was going on. I mean, he was just from that moment.
He was having an alpha moment right there, yeah.
He was taking care of the pack for sure. And so I definitely feel like it must be, or I've been waiting to see how she will carry on now that the real life Adam is gone. And there is, so it was interesting that there was some tension there. And in the book previous to that one, when she's in Europe and they're separated, there was also that sort of
I cried the whole way through that book. I just cried the whole way because that just that was hard.
Yeah,
that was hard. But yeah, I enjoyed it. But I think it meant different things to me because I had met them in person. And maybe people that hadn't met them in person wouldn't have the same experience reading those books that I do. But it's just kind of interesting having met them. So, but I love the books. And if you, and I'm on her fan page on Facebook, and everybody's like, I read it already and I didn't want it to be over. So I tried not to read it so fast, but I couldn't stop. Everybody loves it. She's just a wonderful writer and I love her stories. So.
Yep. Well, thanks for sharing that one. Yeah, one book I remember that I had a hard time. Well, first off, I got stuck on the dedication page for weeks. And I had a hard time reading it, and I parceled it out, was Shepherd's Crown by Terry Pratchett, since I knew that was his last book. And like I said, it took me probably a month before I could get by the dedication in there to even start reading it. But yeah, it wasn't one of his best books, because I think if he'd been allowed to finish it, he would have fleshed it out a little more, but it was his last. So, yeah. So who else has got a book that they want to share with us that they have read recently? Come on, people, pick up a book and read already. How about you, Joe?
Unmute me. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, you're
Okay. I just read Letty Prell's The Need for Error.
Yes.
I got a preview of her reading part of it to edit, and I immediately ordered the book. And that anthology it's really good. But The Need for Error was one of the best things I've read in almost 5 years.
Yeah,
it just blew me out of the water. It's like, wow, that's really good short story. I understand she's working on something longer with the same character now. So.
Ooh, good. Glad to hear that. You work, Letty. You work. Type your little fingers to the bones.
I was gonna say it's kind of fun because Letty stopped in at our chat and craft today, and she was writing while she was listening to us to get ideas. So I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah, that happens, doesn't it? So, who else has got a book they want to talk about?
I have one book I can mention. It's The Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny, and I read this book like probably 12, 14 years ago, and I really didn't like it, and I almost completely forgot it, apart from the fact that I read it more or less the idea behind the book. And now my reading group decided that as it was republished in Poland, and my reading group said, okay, so this is a book we will be discussing on our next meeting. That will be this Tuesday, in fact. And I said, okay, so I need to read it. And this time I somehow enjoyed the book. It was not my favorite book, neither the favorite one by Zelazny, but I think that after those 14 years, I managed to understand it a little bit better and find some more prose in the book. So it was surprising reading.
Wow, thank you. I'm glad to hear that we've got people here from all over the world. This is great. I love book clubs. And I love science fiction and fantasy book clubs. So yeah, go. Everybody needs to read. Read a book. Pick it up. Read it. Who else has got a book they want to share with us?
Susan, I've got one I can talk about for a second.
Okay, JJ.
It was written by local Iowa author Cass Stump. The title is Abigail Roth versus Blood-Sucking Fiends. I'm not going to say a whole lot about it other than I loved it. I thought there were lots of good quotes to pick from. One that I particularly liked was, and here's the quote, "Why won't you just die?" Because I didn't want to. Because Abigail Roth, Monster Hunter, was not going to die at the hands of a glittery, has-been, spoiled brat vampire.
What do we say to the god of death? Not today. Who else has got? Yeah, I love Catherine book. She is really starting to make a name for herself, and she's got a lot of stuff coming out. So she's going to be one of those we need to keep our eyes on. Another Iowa writer, which, you know, I am just blown away by the talent that is here, that we get to see at icons and demicons and archons and places like that. So who else has got a book? I'm looking at all of our people. Sam, I see you're there. You got your hand up. Hey, Sam.
Well, right now I am actually in my rereading books because one of my if I really like a book, I go back to it several times, and it's really funny because I'm like, well, I forget that wasn't there. If nobody knows me, if you don't know me, I have horrible reading comprehension, which is good when you go back to reread a book because it's almost like reading it like new. But then when people ask me what book about, I'm like, or they say, do you remember when that happened? Sure. But I am rereading Insanity by Cameron Chase, partially because we're in such an insane situation right now. Anyways, I'm like, well, can't make it any worse. And it's just a really interesting, it's a big ride. It's a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, where Alice is grown up and Wonderland isn't all nice and pretty, and it's very kind of explorative on, you know, what makes someone insane, what is madness, what constitutes reality versus what's in your head. And so it's very thought provoking and just kind of a nice escape sort of from what we're going through.
Yeah, that's a book that I read on your recommendation. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. So thank you for recommending that to me. So, you know, I'm always loving to talk to people who read books and pass them on because, you know, I don't know. You know, there's so many books that come out.
Yeah. Well, I read a lot of books that I can't talk about because they're, you know, paranormal romance, and it's like, yeah, not everybody's into that. But because I basically eat books. Someone was asking me, people always ask me, well, have you seen this show? Have you seen this show? No, because 9 times out of 10, I'm reading a book. And like, except for now, because I'm stuck at home all the time, then I've been watching TV for the past month and a half. But until then, probably for the past 10 years or more, I read books. So.
Yep. Books are a great way to fill your time and fill your mind and expand your universe, expand your galaxy. You know, science fiction, I love science fiction just because it brings me to so many different places and so many different worlds. I fell in love with it at a very early age. I think the book that probably turned me on my ear was A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. I read that in the 60s, shortly after it had come out. I had seen a little blurb on it in, I don't know, maybe Weekly Reader or something like that, about how it was a book that had a female protagonist. And I said, whoa, okay, I think I want to read this. So I read that, and it was totally different to me, and that the girl who was the protagonist had to make things happen and didn't have things happening to her. You know, like Podcane of Mars, she had things happen to her. She wasn't the one who was doing it. So that's why I really enjoyed Madeline L'Engle's Wrinkle in Time. It just sort of blew my mind and expanded my world, and it's amazing what books will do for you. So I know we've got some other people out there who read books. Is there anybody else who wants to talk about a book today? We got some.
I'm gonna say I do a lot of manga and anime that way, but I get into the light novels of them. And the one that I've gotten into now, because I just like stupid fun, is The Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. And it's silly and stupid, and it takes all the tropes of fantasy and has fun with it and mixes it up and throws it back at you. But it's a good anime, it's a good manga, a good light novel. It's usually sometimes when you get the manga anime crossover, it does not go well. But whoever's doing this is doing a really good of doing the crossovers of everything and the light novels and things like that. So
Hey, it's all reading. It's all reading, whether it's manga, anime, illustrated novels, audiobooks. It's all reading. It's I like it in every which way, every form. Who else who wants to share a book? Cindy, I know you had hand raised. Laura, did you want to share a book with us?
Yeah, although it's hard to do it justice. It was so good. It's 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. And it's up for some awards. And I was really surprised. It started out with this little girl in this big mansion with, like, she's a ward of this old man. I thought, oh, well, it's a mansion. There are going to be all these doors in the mansion, and she'll go off to these cool places. But it was totally beyond that. It was way different than I expected when I started out. And there is this evil society who are trying to close these doors around the world. But this young girl and her father are able to open and go through the doors into other worlds. And she has some allies. She thinks the old man that she's the ward of is good to her, but he's actually not as good as she thinks, and she gradually figures this out. But she does have some people who are on her side. One of her caretakers, Jane, and the grocer's boy, Sam, who come through for her in amazing ways later on. But there are so many surprises in that book. I don't want to give away anything, but it's just a wonderful story. You just find new revelations every few chapters as you're going along. Very imaginative, very creative, and lots of fun to read. So I don't want to give away too much. I say just read that book. It's really, really good.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll put that, I've got that, already wrote it on my list. I got a list going.
Good.
Somebody else? Cindy Selliers, did you want to say something?
Sure. I just reread the Charlaine Harris Midnight series, and I don't know if you're fans of Charlaine Harris. She has many different series, and I think the neat thing about Midnight, the first book is Midnight Crossroads. There's only 3 books in the series. Is that she uses minor characters from her other series, and they all are, these different characters are all gathered in this little tiny town called Midnight, Texas. And I just thought that was such a neat idea, and it's like visiting old friends. It's like going to a con. There they all are. So cool. I really enjoyed that series. They made a TV show out of it, but it is, of course, nothing at all like the books. So read the books.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. She's got a lot of books. And I like it when an author will take some characters that maybe were just sort of like little side characters, and the author decides, well, I kind of like them. Let's see what's happening in their world. There's a few authors that do that, and I really enjoy when they do that. So, how we doing? We're doing good on time. We got a few more minutes. Who else has got a book anybody else have a book they want to share? Alois. Hey, Alois, how is it?
Hi, I have something that I've read,
Okay.
but only because me and my siblings have been cleaning out my parents' house for the last 3 years. So guess what I find in the basement? Books. I don't know if it's reversed on Andre Norton. Apparently my mother liked Andre Norton.
Great.
So I saved like a bunch of collected hardcovers and read them on the bus on the way to work. And it's neat because my mom would like write down very good and what year she wrote it in, and has like little stickers from when she bought it. And then the other books I got from that basement, I've got address labels going back to 1962 when they were married.
Mm-hmm.
But this one I read through, and it's from the 1958, I think, is when this series was started. And it's the U.S. has to find out where the Soviets are getting their advanced technology. And there's no mention of the space race because it predates that.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, the Soviets have excavated a working alien gizmo that travels through time. So, of course, the United States has to go find one too. And then you have this Cold War battle as they travel back through time to find the original spaceship that this gizmo comes from. And they have their escalation from that point in the past.
Yeah,
So
it's great. Buried treasures. And Andre Norton was a pivotal, one of the pivotal early women writers. So yay. I'm glad your mom was reading those and passing them on to you. What else did you find out down there?
Passed them on I had to dig them out of, piles and piles and piles and piles of other books.
Mm-hmm.
But I had fun reading this goofy thing that's, the villain is the Soviet Union because they're Soviets.
Mm-hmm.
That genre of writing where the one and only villain in the universe is the Soviet Union.
Yeah, it sold really well in the 50s.
Well, it lends itself. And you get to the later books, and it's written like from 1958 and various other books up until like 1963, if I look at some of the later ones. And I'm sad because somewhere between book 3 and 4, the main character gets married and he goes off on an adventure with his wife. I don't have that story novella or short story where the main character gets married and drags the wife off on their honeymoon night to save the world by traveling through time.
Well, as you do, yeah.
So somewhere I'm missing parts of this collection that I got to go find now.
Oh, go to the used bookstores and start excavating for them.
Well, I need to actually look up Andre Norton because I'm suspecting my missing story was probably, like a short story thrown into one of the magazines at some point.
That could be.
Somewhere
Or maybe, yeah, it could have been a novella or something in one of the magazines.
And all I have is like the opening of one of the later books in my hands here, where it just says, "Oh," and then his wife walks in and off they go, and I'm like, wife? When did this happen?
Cool.
So it's
All
just
right.
something I enjoyed because my mom enjoyed it, and left it sitting around in the basement of her old family home.
That's amazing. I love buried treasure. So yeah, Craig, you're gonna get a lot of them. Just saying. Kara gets the pig clock though, but you get the books.
Yep. So something I have to look for at some point.
Yep. Yeah.
And I see messages where somebody's saying they're republishing Andre Norton. They should, because there was some great characters in there that I like reading. I found myself cringing at some of the plot points where, it's the villains because they're Soviets.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the entire development of the bad guys was they're Soviets.
Yeah, there was a lot of that in the 50s. It was it sold. And
Yeah,
it sold to the editors, and at that point in time,
that was all you needed to say.
Yeah.
A
lot of the editors were men, and at that point in time, and that was what was like they were going for. That was, in the 50s, the editors were looking for that sort of stuff. So,
but at least Andre Norton, when she did develop the protagonist, there was a lot more going on there than just shoot them up, fly the ship, save the day.
Mm-hmm.
So there was all kinds of personal conflict and doubt, and like, oh my God, what did I just do?
Yeah, character development. Yeah,
yes.
that's essential. That's essential in a novel if you want to get people sucked in.
Andre Norton's characters, so that was fun to read because I'd never gotten into Andre Norton other than I unearthed these. And I started reading them because I saw on the cover, my mom had wrote notes saying, good, okay, very good, 10 years before she actually passed away from cancer. So that was just my find and my share.
I'm so glad you've got those. I'm really glad that you have those books to sort of be that connection between her and you. That's pretty amazing.
Even years later.
Yep.
Sitting
in a basement. Who knows? All right. So do we have anybody else who wants to share? We've got, about 7 minutes. Looks like Cindy over here. Cindy?
Reading some game-lit stuff and some older serial type fiction. The one series that I've read recently was Sentenced to Troll. It was it's written by S.L. Rowland, and it's about a gamer who was a little too aggressive with people online, and so he's sentenced to serve out a 30-day term trapped in a game playing a very unpopular character. And so he becomes a hero for this unpopular character group, and ends up trying to repair relationships between the trolls and the humans, so that they're no longer hunting as people. Another book I read recently was the original Sky Master Battles the Master of Steam. It's by Brian K. Morris. It's if you're familiar with the old movie serials, it's written in the same kind of tone. And the Nazis are collecting all the major scientists in North America to develop a massive weapon, and so a young inventor puts together his own armor and goes after the guy.
That's interesting. I wrote those down, so I'm gonna have to. Thanks for adding to my reading list. Yeah, it's like I really don't have much to do these days. I'm retired, so and I can't go to conventions now. Can't do any of my things, so I'm reading a lot, and watching bad TV, because that's what you do. All right, I just got my 5-minute warning from Joe. So I guess we'll just sort of wrap things up here. I am so happy to be here virtually. Thank you, DemiCon, for putting together this virtual convention and giving me the prime 2 o'clock Sunday slot, which is normally when we be playing Win, Lose, or Draw. And somebody wanted to say hi, make an appearance. The box says hi, and it's going to be doubly cruel next year because it's been lonely. We got him out in January to play Win, Lose, or Draw at DAGOBAH, as is our tradition, but he's so lonely. He just wants to eat up artists and spit them out. So I want to thank everybody here for coming and talking books. Like I said, we're DAGOBAH, the Davenport Area Gathering of Books and Humanoids. We meet at the Davenport Public Library on the second Monday of the month at 6. We talk books, we talk science fiction, television, movies, but mostly we just get together and we chat, because that's what makes for great friendships and great spreading of knowledge, is just sitting down with people who of kindred spirits and talking about the things that we love. So I've been so missing these my book talks and stuff. So thank you so much for coming here and joining me in my dining room and talking books with me. I've got a whole bunch of books listed now, so I've got stuff to read for the next few months, years. You know, the book pile is huge, but we're not going to talk about addictions and things like that, no, because you know it's all good. It's all good. So that's it. Thank you so much. I love you all. And next year in person, come talk books with me.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.